So again, everyone, thank you so much for being here to this session of transforming fear into heart-powered intentions. My name is Suzette West, and I'm a Heart Math certified coach. The name of my company is Wild Heart Rising, and in the midst of all this fear that's going around with this pandemic, I felt it would be a good thing to create something and showcase how people are, rising above, some kind of inspirational stories from different people because, we can inspire each other um, to overcome these really stressful times. And so that's how I came about with the idea of, maybe started out as a class, but it just kind of like was like, you know what? There's so many stories, so many amazing people that, could maybe share their story, a one little moment in time of how they were able to work through uncertainty. And, um, you know, it is, it is very uncomfortable. Most people just, we don't handle change well. And what's going on right now, it's really unprecedented. So this is my way of, bringing something positive to the world, and by showcasing um, people who I just think are amazing. And Jenny, I think you are pretty amazing. So I want to start by getting us centered. So if we can just all close our eyes, get comfortable, get into your body. Take a big, deep breath. And for right now, I want you to focus your attention right behind your eyes. And imagine this golden cupboard. And in this golden cupboard, all the thoughts that you have right now, any worries, just put them in the golden cupboard. And know that they'll be there when we return from this journey. And when you have closed that cupboard, bring your attention back right behind your eyes. And breathe deeply and slowly. And just feel yourself getting settled in. And from this place right behind your eyes, imagine yourself bringing your attention down into your throat area. Just notice the sensations around your throat. Giving gratitude for your voice, the way you express your power in the world. So much gratitude for this place, very special place. And from your throat area, with so much gratitude for this place where you express yourself, where you express your power. Imagine yourself bringing your attention into your heart. And breathe deeply and slowly through the heart. noticing the sensations. And from this place in the center of our hearts, as we're breathing deeply and slowly through the heart, imagine an invisible thread connecting us all together through the heart. And while we are in this heart space, connected to each other, where everything that we speak comes from compassion, no judgment, only loving intentions. As we explore tonight's topic, just breathe deeply and slowly and feel the presence that's inside of your heart. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and arrive here, fully present, fully in your body, fully here together as we begin this journey of exploration. So my first very important thing that I would like to say about fear is that it is a natural emotion. It is not bad. It is part of who we are, and there is a place for fear. It, back in the day, helped us escape predatory dinosaurs, It keeps us from being eaten by mountain lions. It helps us to uh, get out of the way of an oncoming car. There's a place for fear in this world, in our lives. But it becomes a problem when it starts to take over, when it starts to be overwhelming, when it starts to be all consuming. That's when it starts to morph into its own energy. It starts to take on a life of its own and take us in directions that are unintended. And unless we are prepared with how to deal with fear, to use it as an ally, um, and what I mean by that is when something feels off, when a fear shows up, to take a curious approach to it, with curiosity, with compassion. What is this? Where is this coming from? And then really examine the roots of it as an observer, as as a detached observer, compassionate, loving, curious. But what often happens is we feed it our thoughts. It grows. We feed it our thoughts. We think about it. Why am I so scared? And then all of a sudden, all of the self-talk that we use to beat up on ourselves, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, no one likes me, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it ends up creating this momentum, and then it ends up growing and growing and growing. And pretty soon, you're in a state of serious stress. You're having a stress response. You're getting triggered, and depending on how deep the wound is, it can last a long time. And for the really, really deep triggering wounds from back in the day, those tend to come out the meanest. Those tend to come out the worst. And they create this self-fulfilling prophecy because it is energy. It's energy that we put out there. And whatever we put out there, we attract. So fear is an energy. It's meant to be mastered, and not for us to be mastered by it. So what happens when we get into this state of fear? So fear triggers a stress response. Stress produces cortisol in the body. It takes 12 hours for cortisol to leave the body. So if you're in a constant state of stress, your body is constantly producing cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that has been linked to a lot of physical illnesses. We get sick from it. We gain weight from it. There's just so many things that happens to our bodies when there's constant cortisol running in our systems. And we are not built to withstand that kind of constant exposure to cortisol. It's only meant to give us a boost to get out of a dangerous situation and then subside and then go back to a calm state. But when we are constantly stressed out and in fear, what happens is our body starts to think this is a natural state. And then your body thinks, this is where I belong. I'm stressed out, and this is normal. But it's not normal. And you keep producing the cortisol, and then it produces a downward spiral. So fear, although it is not bad in and of itself, it can become bad when it becomes the master instead of being mastered. And the way we do that is through presence, through stillness, through being in the heart, through detaching from triggering thoughts, to remember to be compassionate with ourselves. What is this I'm feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And then just dropping in and just observing it and being fully present, observing. And then it eventually dissolves when you don't feed it juice. Because our thoughts, see, emotion is thoughts in motion. So when we're having an emotional response and we keep thinking stressful thoughts that keeps feeding it, like when we worry excessively, when we're excessively anxious, that's like putting your feet to the gas pedal and revving up. feeding that fear, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But when we detach from the thoughts, when we just simply feel our bodies, feel what's going on, and just observe as a neutral, compassionate observer, just curiously watching it. Wow, that's interesting. What's going on here? Eventually, it dissolves when we don't feed it any more thoughts. When we can say, I'm not going to feed this, and consciously just be present with it, just be with it. It dissolves. And the hardest thing to do is to just be with difficult emotions, not attached to them, not feeding them, but observing them until they dissolve. But they do. They will dissolve if you just sit in observance of them, detached, compassionately detached. So I wanted to read a little piece out of a book called Becoming Supernatural. It's a book by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you've all heard of him, but I love him. He's an awesome book. And so the part I'm reading is Living Heart-Centered. And it goes on, it says, as I said earlier, every thought you think produces corresponding chemistry equal to that thought, which in turn creates an emotion. Therefore, you are suggestible only to the thoughts equal to your emotional state. We now know that when our students are heart-centered and feel more wholeness and oneness, they're less separate from their dreams. When they feel gratitude, abundance, freedom, or love, all of those emotions welcome corresponding thoughts. Those heart-centered emotions open the door to the subconscious mind so that you can reprogram your autonomic nervous system equal to the thoughts of your new future. We also know that if they live in the feeling of fear or lack, but try to think they're abundant, they can't produce a measurable effect because change can only happen when thoughts are in alignment with the emotional state of the body. They can think positively all they want, but without a corresponding feeling or emotion equal to that thought, the message cannot be felt or understood throughout the rest of the body. So there is a correlation there that we have the power to manifest a new future, but only when our emotional state is in alignment with our thoughts. And so when we're having that fear response and we detach from it and we let it dissolve and we sit and be still until peace returns, that is a muscle that we build, and it gets stronger over time. And um, yeah, it's not easy. It's easier said than done sometimes, but um, practice is where it happens. It happens through the breath. It happens through becoming more aware, self-aware, self-connected. And it's very encouraging because it means we have more control over our own destinies just by focusing on what we want and learning how to master that fear response whenever it hits us. And it really comes down to self-connection and building that strength within to sit and be still and be with those difficult emotions and not try to escape them with, you know, things and habits. And oftentimes when we're doing something new, It's very unfamiliar. We don't have a working past knowledge, and so it can be hard to navigate new terrain that you've never been in before, like the times we're in now. Like, who would ever thought an entire world would get shut down? Like, I never saw this coming, you know. In a matter of weeks, our financial system, our economies globally, uh, families that can't even see each other, friends that can't even see each other. This is definitely, we are living in some strange times. And there's a lot of scared people out there. And if there is one thing that we all can take from this class tonight, is how to navigate this time by going within. Because everything that we explore tonight, you can turn around and help someone else when they're going through their stress response. The knowledge that we explore tonight together, you all can be a beacon of light for someone who is struggling with stress. And this is how we can support each other, and this is how we can step up to our greatness during the darkest times, because this to me is like probably one of the darkest times I've ever seen. And so we are lights in the world. We are heart lights. And there's so much power in our hearts that we can use to comfort others that are scared right now. So I want to invite Jennifer to come online and to speak to us about a time not so long ago when she had to make the jump from working a job to being her own boss, and the emotions that she faced and how she went through it. So Jenny, I remember those times.
Yeah.
And I mean, tell us like right before you know you were gonna be done with it. I mean, what was happening?
Yeah. Um, right before, you know, I had been kind of on this track, and I can't explain it other than I had become really dissatisfied with where I was. In 2016, this is when we met, I had taken the Wild Woman Project leadership training because I was so unhappy in my job. And I wasn't sure what else to do other than I just needed more. I needed something, I was searching for, circles in my area and found there were none. And so I was like, well, okay, why not me? And that kind of started me down that journey. I'd spent, I worked for the company I left for almost 13 years. I say 12 because they changed hands, and I worked for that company, that new company, for about a year. So it was really like what I think of as a Jupiter cycle, which is really interesting. But right before, everything had kind of gotten to this like heightened pitch. I knew that the business was changing. I hadn't really fit in there in a long time. My access to our customers, which was kind of my jam, like helping people, solving problems. I was like the work mom. Everybody came like, well, Jenny knows because she's been here forever. And they would come and ask me to do things that really weren't part of my job. And basically my job was to do all these things that weren't part of my job. But I was paid well. I had benefits and everything. I was driving to Seattle. I was commuting 3 hours a day, basically, which was really good for listening to podcasts and audiobooks. But other than that, it was stressful. And, kind of a time suck and a waste of, well, it wasn't a time. I made it not a time suck, right? But during that time, I had started really listening to a lot of mindset and empowerment podcasts. I came across a lot of teachers who I now cannot imagine my life without. And that primed me for being and presence, that presence you spoke of earlier. That, like, when you're present, more things are possible. And I think everybody has a way of being present that's probably different for them. I was always somebody who doodled in class and was, really tactile. I needed, things to do. I'm a production person. So when somebody said, oh, we need to do this, I would be the one to like mock something up, right? And so I really liked doing lots of different things. And because it was so interesting, because I had started off making, $12 an hour as a customer service person in this business that was 9 people. When I left, I was making $36 an hour. I had management skills. I had never gone salary because I didn't want to be beholden to their crazy salary time schedule. And my boss had kind of kept me hourly because he valued me being there, which meant that when I would, it started to feel really weird when I would go travel for the business and I was getting overtime, which was amazing, but no one else was. And so like I became this really weird linchpin in this business, as well as like it was a linchpin in my life. I couldn't imagine how I could make money without this baseline. But I had been listening to a lot of podcasts about, starting your own business, what it meant to be an entrepreneur. And my father had started a business, I had watched him kind of do it, and it was not stable, right? And so there was a huge amount of fear. I'm the breadwinner of my family, and my husband works, but he is a tradesperson who has always worked in a warehouse pretty much. And so he makes, he's all right, and has benefits, but it's not like, and I was the one with the college degree and all this stuff. So it was always just kind of like, I was the one who made the money. So the day I got, this is kind of like but the day I got my notice, and I had been working for the new company, I had transitioned, I knew it was coming. I watched it kind of come. But they gave me working notice, which meant that they gave me 3 months of working notice. And they said, you can move to Chicago, or we can, dissolve your position and you'll get this severance. And I have to say, I had a huge universal net, which I come to feel like my grandmother really had a lot to do with it. She's passed on. And the way some things synced up, I couldn't have created that circumstance on my own. And I think that's really important to note for a lot of people who look like they just fucking made it happen. And yet, so it took me a lot to like receive that, which was one of the blocks that I think I had to move through really intensely, is that there was no, reason other than me like sticking it out with a pretty psychopath. Like my boss was a pretty interesting person to work for, to say the least. But he taught me what it meant to push through and learn things as I went, and that everybody doesn't know before they do it. And anyone who says that they're an expert just decided that and then told people. And and not to say that they were lying, it's just that now, you can figure these things out, and the pressure that comes from just being uncomfortable creates an enormous capacity that you can't imagine when you allow that to come through. When you finally say, it's enough. What's interesting is that I didn't have to say, I'll leave and go. They were like, hey, it's time for you to go. And I was like, yeah, I know. And it was funny because the day before I had this happen, they gave me working notice, I had officiated my first wedding. So I kind of like, I've only officiated one wedding. So I still call it my first. And, I had just, and it was a friend and it was a beautiful night. It was an amazing moment. I thought, for me, I was just like, this is where I'm needing to be, is in service to people who, can use spiritual support. And through that time, that few years leading up to it, one of the things that I was always afraid of was just being fully myself. I was always really witchy and weird. And I wasn't sure, I had stopped asking for permission for everything. I figured if they wanted me to work for them because I was good at my job, then they can accept me for however I am. I wasn't hurting anyone. I wasn't like, I'm not, I'm not talking about like sexual harassment and all this kind of thing, but I was like, like, as far as me, myself, like I was exactly who I wanted to be and started doing that in meetings and not really like playing any role. I was just being myself. And the more I felt that, the more people stopped asking me to be who I wasn't. And I think that, for women of a certain age, it becomes really unbearable to be someone you're not. And that doesn't mean that you can't go to work in a place where, you're not working for yourself or whatever. I had to make it okay. I feel like I'm getting off track. But it's one of those where I had to push through the barrier of me being seen, right? My biggest fear was just being seen for who I was and then being rejected. And I needed proof, which I got, was that, it didn't matter. And I learned from a lot of people. I had a coworker once. We were choosing rooms in a Airbnb that we had rented. And I was like, I'm going to choose this room because I know probably no one's going to want it. It's not in an ideal location. It doesn't have a connected bathroom and blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, you're Switzerland. I was like, yeah. He's like, well, I'm Russia. I'm going to take the nicest room. And he's like, watch what happens. I was like, oh, this is interesting, right? And so there's just this way that, and no one cared. Everyone knew he was going to do it because that's who he was. And he's not a mean person by any means. He's an amazing guy. But I was like, this is hilarious. And I realized, I was like, I'm constantly choosing the non-combative route in order to stay out of harm's way. But in doing so, I often, I had to stuff down my own stuff, which created some anxiety or fear, feelings of like repression. So when I started really listening to my thoughts, recognizing how many times a day I wondered what other people needed, what other people thought of me, what other people were going to say, I noticed that I wasn't on my to-do list. I wasn't really on my top 10 need list. I always wondered what everyone else would want for dinner. I always wondered, how was I going to get this done for myself? And I just often put myself last. And while becoming more comfortable with being my own boss, I had to face the fact that I had to put myself first. I had to take care of my energy, and I had to decide that it mattered who was around me and whose opinion I gave any weight to at all. And then we started working together right after. So like I spent the 3 months and I did, what they asked me to do. I transferred all of the work that I had been doing. I trained some people and, worked on my website, started doing more. I had already been kind of working a side gig for a couple of years. And so when I finally started, there was just this immense feeling that I had to succeed in this. I had to replace my income. And the fear of replacing my income on my own, that's a real life fucking fear, right?
Remember.
And so, we worked through with the heart math work that we did, Suzette and I, she was coaching me, and then it was almost like we traded coaching. We're like kind of encouraging each other. Several weeks in, we were just like, this is different than we thought it would be. Let's be there for each other. We're both kind of working through that. And the intention to go to the heart was something I learned when we went through leadership training together.
Yeah.
Because we start circle just like Suzette did with bringing ourselves into that heart space. And I had never ever talked to my heart and asked it to show up for me. It's the one organ, right, that doesn't get cancer, and it's constantly beating whether you ask it to or not. Like, right, we can change the way we digest. We can change the way that we our hormone levels. You know, she mentioned like cortisol and stuff. Like that shit can all go batty based on our response to our atmosphere, our environment, and our heart increases rate, right, on its own.
Right.
But it's one of those things that it shows up every day, night, middle of the, it's always there. And it's a strength that we have only just now begin to kind of scratch the surface of. And one of the things that I always tell people after having been introduced to that work is that, like, did you know that your heart is like testing everything? It's out 10 feet around you, you know? It's beyond this coronavirus,
Yeah.
testing everything out. Every room that you go into, your heart got there first. And so when you think of that in terms of, I started thinking, I'm with goosebumps right now, but I started thinking about everyone who suffers from social anxiety, people who suffer from abuse, being in families who had, when they went home, the feeling that your heart has of kind of understanding what's going on when you don't, right? And that partnered with, like Suzette mentioned, the way that your brain accepts things when your heart's kind of activated. Well, and if your heart's in that state of fear, it's going to try and survive, right? So your brain's just like trying to find reasons why, find stories why. And that, coupled with that confirmation bias for me, ended up being like, I can't do that. I can't do this. Luckily, I had all these great teachers, and I wrote down some things while you were, that, because the first thing that I did was I questioned my thoughts. And I learned to do this from Byron Katie first, I think. And Byron Katie, she does something called the work. And you just question your thoughts. She has this whole, it's called a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. It's incredible. You can bring any situation to it, but it basically teaches that circumstances are neutral. There's actually nothing that's good or bad. And as soon as people say that, they're like, well, what about kids getting molested? Or the darkest things that you can think of, what about that? It's like, that is a circumstance. And so remember, it's about power. Like, if you want to give your power away and say something, if this happens, that will destroy me. All of a sudden that circumstance has you. It has all of your power. You're giving it all of your power. And when I recognized that it was my choice, yeah, I wanted to feel shitty and angry. And, there is this anger that feels aligned with who I am and what I want the world to be. But that situation doesn't have power over me in the same way that I think it does when, if I lose my job, that will be devastating. These thoughts, these stories that our brain produce to make us feel as though we actually don't have any control or power. And control is a weird word, but power I like much better. So I started, thinking the thought, like, I decide on purpose to be angry about the terrible things in the world, because there are terrible things in the world to feel upset about. And especially now we're kind of faced with our lives looking at, the things. And I always think it's really interesting right now how many people are arguing for normality when they bitched about normality when it was happening. So there's like this, this is what our mind does. It tries to find solid ground always. But the heart, I learned, was this translator from that gut feeling of like, because your gut is like, ooh, it's going to take in a lot. It's absorbing, especially women. I learned through womb work that women's wombs are kind of like this digestive center for energy. And that blew my mind to hear that. Thinking about when our mothers had us, we had all the eggs. So like our kids were in, like we were in our grandmother's belly, like when our moms were in there, right? Like she had us in her egg, like they're energetically, and this is this epigenetic situation that's like kind of beyond, but I feel that. I sense that we can kind of feel other people's things. And the womb is like this digestive place. So once I decided, oh, well, I'm going to do a cord cutting that's one way I transformed some fear, because I realized a lot of it wasn't even mine. It was people saying what I couldn't do. It was people saying like, well, you have got a great job. You should be happy. Really? Is that true? So that's that questioning the thoughts, right? Because I don't even have all my own thoughts. I realized as soon as I started questioning my own thoughts, how many fucking other people's thoughts are in there that don't even deserve any airtime in my being at all.
Mm-hmm.
And my heart, some of that anxiety comes from that heart being out of alignment with the head, the thoughts creating in your heart's like, just come here. I'll tell you all about who you are. I know exactly who you are. Let's fucking remember together. And so when I started doing heart math and reading more about it, every time I would read, there's another book I ran into called Evolutionary Herbalism, which talks about, plants and living beings as like, right? Yeah, you got that book, right?
Yeah.
And when you read stuff like that, it's like remembering and your heart is like singing and you're like, I forgot my body could feel a response that was so positive, because so often we're triggered by terrible negative things, right? We get in that terror cycle. So questioning my thoughts, that's one of the first things that I just really feel like is the tool. So now I practice that so much, you practice questioning your thoughts. Now when a thought comes up, I say, is that mine? Is that true? And when I'm talking to somebody who is insistent upon their reality and they're telling me what my reality is, I say, is that true? Out loud to them. That's all I ask. I don't even most of the time when I'm in my heart.
Yeah.
When I want to question, I just say, is that true? And if they say, yeah, that's true for me. Oh, I haven't experienced that. But tell me more about your experience of that, which helped me to deal with people who didn't like me as well. Oh, you're terrible. Is that true? Tell me more. And that's a way that Byron Katie also, because I realized that, these feelings, right, that we're working with, it's patterning our nervous system. It's just a sensation in the body. So being afraid to feel something, there's this question that one of my other teachers is like, what am I not willing to feel? It's a great question. If in this moment, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this thing. What is it that I'm not willing to feel that I think I'm going to feel when I do this thing? Probably and I fail, right? Because we think we're always going to fail. Shoe's going to drop, someone's going to reject us, right? We're going to get it wrong. And so what am I not willing to feel? I'm not willing to feel rejection. I'm not willing to feel shame. I'm not, and yet we usually feel shame and rejection ahead of time. So that's what we decide when we don't follow our heart, right? We feel that anyways. And so we kind of trap ourselves in this loop. Oh, see, it happened again. I've broken my own heart again. And so, having that sense that, that feelings are just that sensation. And I also am a big fan of just telling myself, fear is a liar, it's a big fat liar. And, my mom taught me the language of fear really young. She's Capricorn, and bless her heart, she's very risk averse. She dealt with her own, a lot of trauma, right? So reaching your neck out, doing things that are kind of out of the norm, put you in danger. It was always the story. And so I had to overcome that with the opposite proof. And you'd never get to the opposite proof if you're not willing to feel the feelings that you think are going to be so terrible. But so often we can't stop that from happening. And that goes back to that circumstances are neutral. Again, when I lost my job, I had the opportunity to believe, oh shit, this is the most terrible thing that could have ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that would make me feel insecure and rejected and fearful. And instead, I think what was available to me, because I had done some of this work, was this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. The work that Byron Katie suggests helps with this, because you say like, what if who was I with that? Who am I without that thought? So if you have this thought that you're like, ooh, that's a weird thought. Who am I without that thought? Right? Like, I'm weird, I'm bad. My kid's a weirdo. I'm not a good mom. Who would I be if I didn't believe that? And the power of like questioning those held beliefs. I'm a black sheep in the family. No one understands me. That was one of my stories. No one understands me. And with that thought, I put walls up so no one could understand me. So I think that that getting to neutral, questioning my thoughts, helped me, and bringing it back to the heart. It had a lot to do with grounding that into the body, because you can't do just everything up here, which is it's always been my MO. It's like intellectualize everything, learn everything. I should know. But until I started actually feeling that shift, then I felt like I had, I use the language around it, saying that I would abandon myself instead of being there with myself. The myself who's feeling fear, the myself who has been through this before and is, really afraid of it happening again.
Yeah.
And it's fucking happens every day still.
You really
So
turned it around, though. You
yeah,
really
I mean, you
turned it
don't get on
around.
the other side of it in the way that you think you do when you're like not, but when you're in it and it's like Elizabeth Gilbert says this in her book Big Magic. She's like, it's not that people who do stuff don't have any fear. It's that they put them in the back seat and they turn up their own radio and they say, listen, you can come with me, but I'm not letting you drive. You're not going to fuck with the radio. You're not going to decide where we're going, but I hear you, I see you, and we're going to do this together. It's okay. Right? Because fear can keep us safe. And learning to notice the difference between the fear, which can be a real liar, and the intuition that says, do I really want this? Can I live with myself if I never change this? Right? And when you're in your heart, the answers come pretty quick. And they don't sound like other people's voices. I noticed the voices in my brain they're often other people's thoughts. It's often it's the programming. And we pick it up everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would just want to tell you that it was an honor to help you move through those initial changes when you were just transitioning over to um, being your own boss, because it was like you were a fish and you just got dropped into this big ocean. You're like, "Ooh, I can swim," and you just
Yeah.
went, pew, you just like took off, and it was like, "Oh, that's awesome." Just inspired me so much to come out of my shell, because I was still in a shell too. I was still just
Mm-hmm.
coming out of a shell too, and so you were very, very inspiring to me how you navigated through your change, because there really is a big change going from getting a steady paycheck
Yeah.
to being the sole person that is responsible. You got to do to get your paycheck now. It's like
Yeah.
constantly making sure that your paycheck is coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very inspiring, because you were fearless. I mean, maybe you didn't feel it. Maybe you didn't feel it, but you were fearless
Yeah.
once you got.
Yeah. Well, I had to manage my mind around it. Like, you can't get away from your mind. So you got to make your mind a really good place to live. And so, yeah, I constantly, now it's like the first thing that happens is, as soon as I have a thought that's like, oh, fuck, you're not going to be able to do this. It's like, look, we've been over, like, I'm just like, it sounds maybe crazy, but I have conversations with myself that doesn't believe every single day. Some days it's worse. Yesterday it was really tough. We had some interactions. She's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm just in it today. And those thoughts still circle, right? But with tools like the inquiry and Tara Brach, which you talked about last class, the rain, the reflection, just being there for myself and recognizing I'm not bad or wrong. I'm not bad or wrong for having these feelings. They're exactly what happens when you change something, when you level up into the next version of yourself, when you fucking take the risk. No one in society, I saw there's a picture, maybe hopefully many of you have seen it. It's like the most, in a world where everyone profits off of you hating and not believing in yourself. Loving yourself is a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
And when you decide that you actually belong here and no one else, like what the, then things start happening. Like I'm going to walk into a place that you can walk it. You feel like you can walk into a room, and because the universe put me there, I belong there. There's no question.
Yeah.
Maybe there's only one person I'm supposed to talk to in that room. And so maybe I have to talk to everybody to figure out who the fuck that is. And, it's going to take all of my spoons that day, to really be there. But that's how I've experienced it, kind of dissolving away quicker.
Yeah.
And it takes practice.
And
And
it builds
creating
up.
good triggers, it takes good triggers. It's like you think of a trauma response and you think about creating those good triggers for yourself. I still have ones that I'm like, I should eat some Cheez-Its right now. And then I think, oh no, maybe I should not eat Cheez-Its. Maybe I should eat the Cheez-Its after I have the feelings instead. And then sometimes I still eat the Cheez-Its and sometimes I don't. Right? Like I'm still fucking eating. And you have to be okay with yourself and then really enjoy those Cheez-Its or whatever.
Yeah, if you're going to enjoy Cheez-Its, just enjoy it.
Make that decision and take your power back. You are not powerless against Cheez-Its.
Yeah.
You decide. I decided Cheez-Its are going to help me right after I have this feeling.
Just love what you do. Love it. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
So did anybody want to ask a question or have a feeling?
Do you want to read them or do you want, there is something in the chat.
Yeah, let me see. Chat. Oh, Tanya, I find it interesting when you mention the link between the feelings you're afraid to feel when facing change are the exact feelings you might be already feeling. I might be unhappy, unfulfilled without your job, yet you were feeling unhappy and unfulfilled even though money was good.
Right? This is, Tanya, it's really good to see you like in real life, right?
Yeah,
like, we know each other through interwebs. Yeah, no, this blew my mind. And this is a thought that came and a teaching that came from Brooke Castillo's podcast. I talk about her all the time on my podcast because I'm obsessed with her. She introduced me to Byron Katie and a few other, but a lot of her teachings are based on Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie and some of the just thought work that you have to do. Like your brain is a processor, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And there's garbage coming at it from every angle. You only have to grow up watching commercials to understand that there is something that everybody wants your mind to be doing. And, as a woman, especially, a lot of it has to do with who, I was a tomboy forever because I thought if I was feminine, I couldn't be a feminist. Like there's this kind of betrayal of the self based on what other people want to define. But yeah, the feeling of, you decide, like she always talks about, Brooke Castillo, she always talks about deciding ahead of time. Because if you don't try it, you failed. You already failed. It's like, oh, well, I know what that feels like because I didn't try it. At least I know I didn't fail actually giving it my best, right? But when we take the power away from a failure and say, well, I didn't fail, I learned something. And, that too helped me to really be like, if I try one thing, that doesn't mean that I'm no good or I can't ever get to where I want to go. But I also, one of the things, what I did right before I actually got laid off is I was thinking I wanted to be a wedding planner. And so I had decided, I was like, oh, I want to do events. I want to be part of creating something. And I really liked, being part, I thought I wanted to do that. I did one. And that was not what I wanted to do. But until I would have had that pipe dream of this is what I should be doing. That will make me happy until I did it and recognized that wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't make it mean anything about, oh, I don't have any drive, or I don't know, I have no decision, blah, 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 all the stories, which I could have done. And instead I just said, wow, I'm glad I tried that, you know? And yeah, there's a couple of really good podcasts that Castillo puts out about the way that we decide ahead of time to fail, and how that perpetuates this thought of I can never be happy, and she also says, all the feelings you want to feel when you think you get to the other side of whatever you're obstacling about, they're
Mm-hmm.
available to you right now. Though every feeling is available to you right now.
I think I remember something that she mentioned, fail better.
Yeah. Yeah,
Fail
feel very
better.
specifically. Yeah.
When you fail at something, to not see it as something that's self-demeaning or
Yeah.
self-deprecating, or,
Yeah.
I'm
Our
so
brain
bad.
tells us it's like something about us, like, oh, see,
Yeah.
and that's Tara Brock's work kind of touches on that,
Yeah.
because we have
Yeah.
this
She
innate
does that too.
nature that says I'm bad, I'm no good. As soon as something judges us or rejects us or whatever, it taps into these core wounds,
Mm-hmm.
right? These core wounds that we are very prone to as humans,
Right.
and most of us experience one or all of them as children, which is the core shame, betrayal, and abandonment. Right? So those three core wounds, those are, everything kind of boils back down to those three things: feeling shame, feeling abandoned, feeling betrayed. And we go about trying to negotiate our circumstances in order to not feel those feelings. And when you realize I'm willing to feel ashamed, but I'm going to question the thought and say, do I have, do I have a reason to feel ashamed for what I did? No, I showed up how I want to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, I didn't handle that very well. Let me go apologize. Then you can take your power back from all of those things that are going to make you feel some way.
Yeah. And that's where the fear is. It's the fear of feeling those things.
Yeah. So as soon as you take the power away, like, you know what? And you stop taking things personally. My boss, who's kind of crazy, he taught me this in a very harsh way, to be honest. But it was about year 6. I just stopped taking anything personally from him, and I started playing the rubber and glue game. Like every time he said something about me, I was like, wow, that's how he feels about himself.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, done.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow. And then I just had compassion for him,
Yeah.
you know? And I recognize that's how people kind of go about judging others. I did it for, it helped me with a few relationships that were really challenging for me, to recognize what I was saying about them and saying, wow, I got to look at myself on that. How do I do those things? And yeah, some people are just really tough, and they're not for you, or I'm not for them too, right? I'm not for everyone.
That's probably the hardest thing, because
Yeah.
we have this like tendency of just wanting to be liked. It's like, oh
Yeah.
my God, what did I do? And something
Yeah,
must
that's
be
a
wrong with
program
me,
too.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
So,
okay. Like, you can be like, it was just like, there was a saying, it's like, that, again, I feel like I quote her all the time. You should definitely listen to her podcast. She says, you could be the juiciest fucking peach, and there's still going to be somebody who doesn't like peaches. Like, don't make that mean anything about yourself. That is like a .1 error for your brain. And your brain is like, and your heart knows that's not true. That's the thing. So like, if you're able to consistently get into coherence, which is the language of heart math, get into coherence, if your heart really feel that, it's not true. It's just, we had access to that when we were younger, most of us, and it got, you know, out of us.
mm,
There's a lot of gaslighting going on,
a lot.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
You don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. You should be happy. Look how everything you have to be grateful for. Love and light, love and light. It's like, by the way, life doesn't promise me that I'm, happy 100% of the time. I'm willing to feel shitty sometimes, because shitty things happen. I don't want to feel excited about, you know, all these things that have happened, that have caused me pain. I actually want to feel that pain.
Hmm.
I really want to, allow that pain to shift and change me and teach me.
Yeah, often there's something in that that's trying to get our attention, and it's like dropping into that and be like, what's this all about? Again, just approaching it with curiosity and compassion for yourself. And, you
Yeah.
know,
And
it's a lot. You have to learn that,
well,
you
and
know?
in yoga, in that tradition, you know, the heart, the anahata chakra is the unstruck chord, like that is unbreakable. Like we have all these sayings around my heart gets broken, all this. It is actually so strong energetically, you know, and its magnetic field is, I mean, once you feel it, you're like, it's incredible. So when you helped me to do that. When we started that, we would just, I mean, I would just, it's like, even just in this beginning, I was like, oh, you know, and though I think that being there intentionally can really shift. And it doesn't mean you're not going to, you know, so yeah, just as a disclaimer, like if you're not feeling it, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to say something, Kelly?
Yeah. Kelly, unmute yourself.
Hi guys, I'm
Hey.
Kelly. I met Suzette back at Wild Woman Fest like 4 years ago now, huh?
Ah,
Is it 4 years?
Yeah. Someone, yeah.
someday.
She's a sister circle leader.
Yay! Someday
Yes.
I will get there.
Well,
I was gonna go to the Heartlight. I had been asked to teach at the Heartlight, and then they canceled it because it just didn't work out. And good thing they canceled it
I
ahead of time.
know.
Yeah, it would be happening
I went
this
to
week,
Heartlight
like
last
next weekend or something.
year. I went last year to the first Heartlight, and it
Yeah.
was beautiful. So, but I wanted to like ask you, you know, about like, um, I'll just give you the example that I have, like that, you know, I have this fear that I am going to, you know, I'm in the middle of doing my 300-hour yoga teacher training,
Mm-hmm.
and I am feeling very distant and disconnected from this teacher, you know, and I think part of it in the back of my mind is that, you know, she maybe supports me and has a different kind of love for me, but she's like emotionally unavailable. And I know she doesn't completely support the Wild Woman Project,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like she supports what I'm doing for the community, whatever, but behind that, it doesn't resonate with her.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a distance, and I'm beginning to think that, you know, this teacher is no longer for me. So I'm just curious, when
Mm-hmm.
you had made these changes for yourself, you know, you said luckily you had these teachers available to you,
Yeah.
and she's pretty much like, she was like my go-to teacher, like as far as talking about spirituality. Did you ever feel like you were your own best teacher rather than the people that were surrounded by you in your life? Because, you know, sometimes you get that fear of questioning yourself, and you're in victim, you know, so
Yeah, there's this tendency to look externally for things. I mean, yeah, I think, like I mentioned, like when I actually, you know, the experience of feeling it, and again, it can be helpful to question the thoughts that, you know, whatever you're having thoughts about, like what that doesn't, you know, it's her ability to teach in the way that is in alignment can affect you. And it's also teaching you something else. You know, Pablo Picasso said, this is like one of my favorite, it's like, art is a lie that makes you realize the truth. So even when you are, it's just the same way as like following the fear and recognizing like what I feel fearful about is what I should go towards. I think a lot of times for me, when I was searching for meaning or searching for teachers, the resonance of what was happening did show me, like I still had to listen to my body. Like I knew when something was out of alignment, right? That's still tuning the channel, right? The more you can tune in and validate those feelings for yourself and say, you know, and maybe that doesn't mean, it doesn't have to mean anything, right? It doesn't have to mean you have to give up or disconnect. It doesn't mean you have to do anything. It doesn't mean that if you stay and learn from this person that your training isn't valuable. It doesn't mean anything that might, you know, have, you know, I think I had imposter syndrome and all that stuff comes up when you think whatever I did wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And so does that mean I'm not good enough or whatever? And maybe that's putting words in your mouth, and that's just me.
Nope, not at all.
But I mean, those are the thoughts that start to come in, and notice, well, did I feel that about other things that I've done before? Is this a pattern of thinking that I have? When did that, because this is what I did. It's like, when did I start feeling that? So it's doing that inquiry, the self, mining almost your life. You know, it's like, oh yeah, you know what? One of the first times that I felt like I couldn't do something for myself, you know, and by the way, I have a lot of trouble asking for help because somehow that means that I can't fucking do anything and I'm stupid. Like, those are the thoughts, right? Oh, I've had to ask for help, so I'm not good, which is just a lie. And when I went, yeah, bringing it into the body, the self-practice, and yoga's changed my life, particularly yin yoga, because yin yoga is long pause. You're just there with your thoughts.
You don't hold your breath.
And your breath and your body and all the things you've ever done and the, you know, what might be going to go wrong later. And then you just get to come back to the breath. So that practice. But yeah, I mean, I think my body is my teacher, and it teaches me to tune into what's in alignment. And then I get to go on the journey of like, well, how far away do I have to be from that thing that's not for me? Can I allow it to just dissolve can I allow it to just be in the field? Like, I have family members that I just, I banter with. I don't go down the rabbit hole with, and because I know that's not going to serve me. And yeah, there's
do they support you with that?
Say again?
I was going to say, do they support you with that? Like, some that you have, like, you banter with, and some that you just kind of like, okay, I'm just going to put kind of like a boundary there so we don't get to that point.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, it was really toxic for my whole family when we would kind of go at each other. And when we decided it didn't matter that we had different feelings about things, because when we got together, we weren't going to do those things anyway. I wasn't going to make everybody meditate and look at crystals or talk about witchy shit, and I have my own thoughts around why we have to pray when they go, there's things that I deal with that I just am like, I decided, and it's not because I'm the bigger fucking person. I'm not. I have those judgment thoughts all the time while I'm doing those things, but I still know that like it only serves me to say, I know what I need, and what I want is to be in alignment with myself. And so when I get triggered and get all in that clinchy feeling, I have to prove myself. I have to prove that I'm valid. It's like, there's a Brené Brown quote that says like, I don't negotiate my power or my value with anyone. And I think that's a very powerful statement. And I aspire to step into that every time I'm challenged by something. Yeah. And I don't need their support in that way. I don't need them to support me disengaging,
Yeah. Anna says, great information.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Very good information.
Did I answer your question, Kelly?
You definitely did, because like, I'm just thinking of like, you had this job, this giant transition, and you were fortunate enough to be in a position where you knew within X amount of time you were no longer going to have that position.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of a blessing in itself, whereas some people, well, I was going to say a lot of people that go from a job to wanting to be their own entrepreneur. Because I mean, I'm, trying to kind of get into that same path myself. Luckily for me, I have a hardworking, supportive husband where, that I can play around with different modalities and what's really calling to me. Because I'm feeling that type of way too. And the biggest fear behind that is the security, like that sense of security, how you're going to be able to support yourself. How are you going to invest in this, and am I going to be supported from my family if I'm emotionally feeling challenged? Am I going to be supported from my teachers if I'm feeling emotionally challenged?
Well,
tell me.
Having the Wild Woman Project have my back, having people like Suzette have my back, having other witches that I know have my back. I don't need someone who doesn't believe in me. Like, I don't need their support. And that's not saying that in like, I don't need your support. And if they decide that I prove it to them afterwards, I mean, my parents, it took them, they're like, what? You're not going to look for a job? Even my husband was like, because when I got that notice, I was like, oh yeah, I'm not looking for a job. I'm fucking working on my website. I'm going to work on, first quarter, and I think I'm also, I'm fortunate that I watched a small business grow. I knew, a lot of the things that it took to kind of get myself going. But I had to believe that I could do it.
Did you ever work?
Especially when no one else did. Especially bet on yourself.
Okay.
You have to bet on yourself. No one else will.
I was gonna say, did you
That's
ever
right.
worry about
That's
credibility?
right. That's right.
I did, but then what I did was, it's like when you look for proof, you'll find it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if you want to ask but your brain's a powerful tool, right? So you got to ask it good questions, right? So you wake up in the morning, you say, how am I going to be a boss today? And instead of, how am I going to go work for somebody today? Right. Which was a question I asked myself a lot when I woke up. I was like, fuck, I got to go work for somebody today. So like, remembering that, like, you get to, and your brain will fix it. Your brain will try and solve that problem. So if you're like, why do I always do this? Your brain's like, let me tell you why you always do this. You're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this. Plenty of thoughts. Right. But when you like, that's another teaching. It's like, put your brain to work on shit you actually want it to solve. Like, how am I gonna make a living with all the things that light me up, so that I get to be who I want to be every fucking day?
Mm-hmm.
And your brain will be like, let me tell you. And then when fear comes up, your brain's like, oh yeah, there's that too. And you still have to work through it.
Yeah. And it doesn't help when people externally try to force their opinions as, you need to align with my beliefs, like some, you know what I'm saying? Like trying to make you align with their perceptions. And it's like,
yeah. So like and that's that good question. I highly recommend it when people say, wow, you should be looking for a job. Is that true? You can't do this. Oh, is that true? How do you know? Oh my God, you have no idea what I'm capable of. I left a job one time because of some spat, right? Well, it wasn't some spat. It was terrible. I left Walmart when I was young. I had my son, he was young. And I left that job. The manager, someone returned some fish and she flushed them. And she had asked me to flush them. They were living fish. She asked me she was like, oh, there's nobody in that department right now. You have to flush them. I was like, if you flush those fish, I will leave. And and I did. And the manager at the time was like, you're going to wake up tomorrow and not have a job and you're going to really feel sorry for this. I was like, you don't know who the fuck I am, bro. Like, I was like, you do not know who I am. You have no idea what I'm capable of. And I have had that fire in me. I think that's that rebelness. And it's kind of like, sometimes you do need to show up as the warrior in your own story. You have to.
Sacred anger.
Yes, sacred rebels.
Sacred rebels.
That's great. I don't have that deck.
Yeah,
You love it?
I absolutely. This deck lately, every time I've been drawing a card, even tonight when you were talking about it, I drew.
What'd you draw? Let's see it. Oh yes.
I drew.
That's awesome.
What is already with you card, and I'm like, it's basically telling me everything you have is right there, and I'm like, there's those stories.
You just have to find those things that pull it out to you, and your heart is a really good navigator. It's a really good one, and yeah. And so tuning in, that's the language. It's like, I'm gonna tune in to that. I'm gonna tune into that field.
There is no coincidence. We've got all this warrior energy in this room right now. Yeah. I'm serious. We've got all this warrior energy.
Yes.
It's here.
And if you're ever making something mean something, whatever, you're like making some story, then yeah, you have permission to fucking chat me or probably Suzette up and be like, I have this story. It's like, oh, it sounds like a terrible story. You need to, question that story.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. If we were meant to do and live small, it would feel nice.
Yeah.
It would feel great.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I would like to add with your session today that there was a couple of things that really, first of all, I love how you use epigenetics. I'm really interested in that kind of stuff. Love that
Yeah.
stuff. You know, when you're talking about being a warrior, currently, the work that I'm in is I work with people that have a substance abuse problem, mental health problem, that are homelessness, and that some people are in the criminal justice system. And we're still working during this COVID-19 stuff. So every day, crisis arising, the negative energy, and something that you mentioned, you know, changing those negatives into positives has been something that was a skill that had to be acquired. I reached out to my sister. I said, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
A negative environment. And I got other people's lives in my hand. So I've been using what my sister has been teaching me in my groups with people that are homeless, hopelessness. Like if someone when they're broken inside and hopeless, they don't want to fight for themselves. They don't want to make it. They just want to stay there. But then when I step in and use the skills that you guys use on us to better ourselves, I'll tell you what, have helped 10 homeless people get off the streets, off the drugs, and loving themselves. And the job is not easy. It's very hard.
Yeah.
And it saddens me is because people mistake, oh, these people are crazy. They're not crazy. Their soul, their inside is broken. So when I start doing, because I'm assistant program manager now, and but I love my job, okay? And the people I work with are not on the same level with me, because not only am I dealing with negative, clients, I'm dealing with negative staff. And since I've been working with my sister and been doing this heart math, I've been able to advocate and step up and hey, what you're doing, I'm setting my boundaries, like this is not the way it needs to be done. I'm able to speak out without judging or blaming, but in an effective way where shame on you for acting this way. So when someone's negative, I throw a positive, and you know what? I'm able to feel it. Now, I'm also able to feel the energy of here, I'm just trying to help people, okay? And I never knew until I was with my sister and doing this heart math that people, if they have a low self-esteem and they're broken inside, and and I'm going to be a threat to them. So when people are mean to me, I realize, hey, that has nothing to do with me. It has to do with them. And I can't take it personally. And so what I do is that negative energy, I just throw it out and I put in positive. I have my grandkids' pictures I look at. I listen to motivational videos on YouTube when someone really pisses me off. I was the one that was the black sheep, been in prison, had a gang banging. I was always, drug use, drug dealing, I was bad, okay? And I was able to, it was a traumatic event that changed my life that said, hey, I got to do something. I got to change because, my being in prison and my daughter telling me that she was molested and she couldn't tell me this while I was out of prison, that right there was like, now we really need to take care of business. Mm-hmm. So basically I said, fuck everyone. I got to figure out what's going on with me. And as the years went by, then I was able to reach out to my sister and say, hey, now I need some more help. I get the concept of living life on life's terms, but now there's a higher me that needs to come out. And it was my sister who pulled it out. And now that I love my work. And you talked about transitioning. Well, the transitioning for me is, I told my boss and I told everybody else, I will not work for another company. I will build my own. I'm investing in myself. I'm getting my PhD and all this. For me, every trial and every challenge that I'm dealing with at work and with other people, I'm able to look at it as a lesson to enhance my skills so I can help people. right? So instead of hustling drugs and all this on the street, now I'm hustling and giving people the hope to believe in themselves and to increase their life. But it's not easy, you know, it's not easy. And all I do is I perceive something difficult and I say, hey, that's not difficult. That's going to make me stronger. So let me figure it out. I have been able to deal with, for an example, we had a client, 62 years old, was an alcoholic, and we provided funding for him living in a sober living. He wasn't looking for work. He was in chemo, has a hole in his heart, had prostate cancer, and his funding ran out. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just got this person from another counselor. Where did we fall short? So I had to advocate and say, hey, let's fund him for a little bit longer. Give me enough time to get him some income, to get him stable housing so he can be self-sufficient, you know? And because of my effective communication and being a positive person, I was able to extend funding and not throw this elder person out on the street with nothing. You know, the stuff learned from the heart math has helped me to be able to help others, and others in a big way, not a small way. We're talking about when someone believes and hopes in themselves, then shit gets done. They start making changes. When they start channeling that negative energy into positive, then, you know, hey, I no longer need that drug to numb my feelings. I'm not crazy. They start believing in themselves. And by just me telling my story, that instills that hope and light within that individual to make the same actions. So I want to say thank you for all the work you guys do.
Anna, so Christina
Thank you for
says,
sharing that.
the world needs more of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 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 queen. How does that go? Yes, queen.
Well, and you mentioned epigenetics at the beginning of that. All the shit you're doing ripples. It magnifies. And that I'm chill. And yeah. It's really fucking beautiful.
Oh,
And
Tanya says,
all of that happens because you decided that it mattered to show up for yourself and to be who you can be in the world.
so
I'm a teacher, I'm a mentor, I'm a counselor, and I'm turning people's life around. And one core belief I have, if I can't do it, then I shouldn't be teaching. But I can do it. I believe in myself. Therefore, I teach it. Right now, because of the COVID-19, I'm having to do individual sessions over the phones and not doing outpatient, group sessions. I'm having to reach out to all my clients. And we've been talking about self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always say how an individual perceives self will influence their quality of life, right?
Yeah.
What you feel determines.
Yeah, and if you don't feel, if you're like I said, your feelings come from your thoughts. This is cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you're feeling anxious, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling uncertain. By the way, when Kelly was talking about the uncertainty of working for yourself, I think COVID-19 has proven that any certainty is an illusion. We're building castles on sand in life on this earth. That is something that's also programming. Like, if it's good, it's solid, it'll last forever. Nothing, nothing like that. But not even my beautiful skin, like nothing. My fingernails, they're gone. I chewed them off. Nothing is permanent, right? And so the security we search is human, but it's not true. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't decide to do the best thing we can to build a good foundation for ourselves and to teach ourselves to really respond. That's like training that nervous system with the heart work. It trains your nervous system to not just react, but to actually process and respond in a way that allows your heart to be involved. It's orchestrating your energy rather than your brain and your gut being like, it's a fucking shit show, oh my God, and you can tell as soon as you click into your heart, you're like, wow, I don't feel like the same, and you may feel more intense effort. It may feel more intense, but you don't feel the same as when your brain and your gut are kind of just hashing out worst case scenarios over and over again.
So I got a question here from Tanya.
From Tanya.
She wants to know what is epigenetics?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's this, I wanted to look it up because it's like, it's a concept of things that I understand, and maybe Anna has more, but it actually means, it's a noun from biology. It's the study of changes in organisms caused by modification of gene expression rather than alteration of the genetic code itself. So it's this story, I have a couple of stories in my mind that I think of, is that twins are born, one becomes a concert pianist, the other one becomes a bricklayer, and their genes are different after having different life experiences. So that's one thing. One of the other things is, like I mentioned about, and this is something that epigenetics kind of the way we hold trauma in our bodies, and it affects, you know, these, the mitochondria, the way our body actually works. The mitochondria is a hormone regulator, and you can flip on. It's like these autoimmune diseases that people are popping up with all over the place has to do with, my understanding, and it's very not scientific, is that there's these switches in the mitochondria that get triggered by different things. And generational trauma, especially when we talk about people, you know, we are, you know, I'm a white lady, so my colonizer ancestors and all of these things, I'm, you know, I have more shame, I think, in, you know, as a basic. Mm-hmm. Some of it is like a lot of guilt. I have guilt and shame for being who I am. That's a whole thing that I deal with on a personal level, and try and do my best to show up who I am. When we're talking about just women in general, I think there's a huge amount of generational trauma from our wombs not being our own, and not owning our bodies, that they're commodities, they're sold and won in wars. And
so it's like inherited trauma.
Yeah. And they're finding that it's really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it, you know, so when you deal with things that aren't yours,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah. So Tanya says, I understand exactly what you're saying now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Christina says karmic trauma. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 And you know, the funny thing with that is after each generation, you know, the gene changes, right? And then, for an example, our grandfather, Clyde, had a alcohol addiction. And nobody knew about it. You know, nobody never knew about it. But what happens is it goes down the line of the family, right? And what activates that gene is your environment. So if you're living in a stressful environment, bam, mm-hmm. that gene activates. Yes. For an example, overweight in our family is key. Okay, even though I was doing meth, I never lost weight. I was 304. I was a big fat girl jumping fences. Let me tell you, it was running from the cops. It was crazy, right? But I overweight. Well, because I left home so early and I had a traumatic childhood. You know, pregnant at 14, all that. When it came down to being in recovery, exercising, trying to lose that weight, I could not lose that weight. As a matter of fact, I lost 6 pounds because I was in the gastric bypass class, and I got the gastric bypass because the stress, because of my lifestyle, my body was holding on to that fat. But once I got that surgery, I was able to shed. Now I'm 160 pounds, but it goes with diabetes. It goes with cancer. It goes with any other kind of disease. It goes with addiction. It also comes with recovery.
Yeah.
So recovery is possible because it has been, it's through, you know, me and my husband have recovery, therefore it's going to pass on. My daughter has recovery, and it's going to pass on to generations. Yeah,
there's like this healing link that happens. And again, like, and because of the heart math, like this jumps bodies. Like it feels like when, as you're talking, I'm like, it jumps bodies when we activate our hearts. You know, this healing that you were like received into yourself and bet on yourself, advocated for yourself, something, you know, that is also the spark that turns on, that I think is, you know, I mean, something in you, right? And I always hear that within people And I experience, it's just something clicks on and it's like, no, enough. And sometimes you can't get there by yourself, and especially like when you say the people you're working with are, have experienced such trauma, and it's piled and piled on, that it's an incredible weight to bear alone, which is why we're all spinning through the universe together. It's because we're not supposed to really do it alone,
Yeah. Well, ladies.
I also want to say, living in the United States, it's an individualistic approach compared to like China working together, as a collectivist. So we're always just worried about us. So it's really, you rarely see people caring for others,
Yeah.
For an example, anytime I see someone homeless, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Hey, we're here whenever you need. I never push my services on anybody, but I stop and I say basically, how are you doing? And I reach that hand out and I give them a card, because that person's struggling. And then I say, hey, are you hungry? I'll go get them some food. But I'm not afraid of this person, right? A lot of people are afraid of the population that's just broken,
Yeah, nobody wants to look at it. I think that's an important point, that I think after all of this, being a collectivist, I love that term. To me, the collective, it's such a powerful word. And spiritually speaking, this is the great kind of wake up in that way.
It is.
We are more connected than we ever imagined, and every separation is an illusion. And we're only as strong as the weakest among us. Weakest meaning like, traumatized, vulnerable, whatever. And
this pandemic has brought people together. Okay. And another thing I wanted to say is, we're having our session good. Another thing I wanted to say about I was outside, of the back of my building, and there was a homeless person there on the step. And, you could tell there was some mental health going on. And he was not even like 5 feet away from me. He didn't care if I was there. But he had his crack pipe, his crystal pipe out, which I haven't seen, I don't know, maybe 15 years. But he was sitting there, loading it, smoking it. And I think to myself, I look at this person and I can see. And I told a couple of coworkers, but when I was looking at this person, I'm not being weird though. I swore there was an evil spirit within this person, because the way he was talking, he acted like he was crazy and smoking, and I was talking to him. I says, hey, we're here to help whenever you need it. Oh, okay, thank you. And then kept on smoking while he was talking to me, and I go, and hey, just hey, be safe out there. Don't smoking that in front of public people, because the cops can take you. So try to do it in a private place. Trying to keep them aware. But I saw that, and I was like, addiction is more than just a physical and mental thing. It is spiritual. And within my dissertation, I'm going to prove this, because a human body needs a spirit to live. A spirit lives within us on earth. And when we taint it and put things in it, we take from that experience of the soul, of the spirituality within us. I can ask people, hey, what does spirituality mean to you? Some people don't have a clue. They're so focused on the physical self and the physical environment that they have neglected and disconnected with their soul and their spirituality.
I think I love that you're mentioning that. I want to say that it's, I experience it in myself as I send myself away. And I did this very young in order to avoid the feelings of trauma and shame that happened when I was young. And, without clinicizing it as dissociation, which it could be, dissociative behavior, you send your spirit away so that it's safe. And the process of calling it back to you through coming back to yourself is not usually something you can do alone, And
It's
Yeah,
hard, babe.
pulling all your parts back together after you've sent them away through trauma is a really intense thing. But I think also like the seed of that, like as soon as somebody understands like, oh, I sent part of myself away, it really doesn't take, you know, you can call yourself back. I mean, in some ways, you know, us, there's part of me that gets, you know, does errands, you know, or what, you know, so there's this consistency, I think, of calling yourself home. And that's what ritual and, you know, meditation, being in
Self-connection.
the body, connection can do.
Self-connection, yeah.
Yeah.
Being in your heart.
I see the time, and I know
Yeah, so
I want to
want to
honor
be,
time.
yeah, want to be respectful of everyone's time. So happy that you guys came to spend this time with us, and I hope that everyone got something good. Christina says thank
Thank
you,
you. Thank
and
you for showing up, everyone.
yeah, thank you for showing up, and you know, reach out.
Yeah.
If you need an ear, reach out to either me or Jenny.
Yeah.
You know, we're here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, all you West Coasters.
Yeah,
Yeah, right?
Anna says
Where are you at, Kelly? Where are you?
I'm in Connecticut.
Connecticut. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So
Suzette. Thanks, Jennifer.
thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Nice to meet you all. See you all.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
See you in another Zoom room.